Greeting and salutations. I am Lloyd, a producer at LCD Productions, and I have come to share this new series of visual audiobooks with you, the listener, the supporter, the viewer. Together we will go on a journey like never before, fly to new heights with Project Aerospace, explore new land and cityscapes with photations, even change the dimension of time through the power of time-lapse photography from live to tape. We'll even travel beyond the mind's eye into worlds captured and generated through animation from Thumbs United daily animation series. As we together go on these journeys filled with photography and theater of the mind, I hope you remember the core belief that we hold, that anyone can become the master of art, meaning that it is not some born skill what makes someone good at being creative. It is the desire to practice and spend time being creative that creates the master. I hope that these films, photography, and stories inspire you to set some time aside and practice some creativity. I believe if we all spend more time creating and being constructive, the world would be a better place, a more friendlier and fulfilling place. Thank you for coming. Let's begin this journey. Hello, this is Live to Tape in partnership with Project Aerospace. We are recording the visual audiobook of The Airship, The Golden Hind. Chapter 1. Startling Proposition. "What's the move?" inquired Kenneth Caton. "Ask me another, old son," replied his chum, Peter Branstein. "Fordyke is a cautious old stick, but he knows what's what. There's something in the wind, you mark my words. Then you're going to see him?" "Rather. And you too, old bean. Where's a pencil? We can't keep the telegraph boy waiting." Branstein tore a form from a pad and scribbled on it in the reply, "Fordyke, Ayr Grange, near Blandford. Yes, we'll expect motor tomorrow morning." And he had taken the initial step of a journey that man had never before attempted. Kenyon and Brandith were both ex-flyer officers of the Royal Air Force. What they did in the Great War now matters little. Sufficient it is to say that they had belonged to any belligerent nation save their own, they would have been styled aces. But since in the Royal Air Force details of personal achievement were depreciated and the credit given to the Air Force as a whole, they merely carried on until ordered to get out, or in other words, be demobilized. and then each with a highly prized decoration of gratitude of precisely the same amount as that's given to an officer who had never served anywhere save at the Hotel Cecil. They found themselves literally on their feet, relegated to the limbo of civilian life. It was not long before they found how quickly their gratitude diminished. Like many other ex-members of His Majesty's forces, they began to realize that in smashing the German menace, they had helped to raise a menace at home, the greed and cupidity of profiteers. They were just 2,000 of skilled airmen, of whom as just there were just 2,000 skilled airmen, of whom as such there was now no need. Commercial aviation had yet to be developed. Trick flying and exhibition flights led to nothing definite, and only a very small percentage of wartime airmen could be retained in reconstructed Air Force. Kenyon and Bernstein were not men to take it lying down. They had pluck and resources and a determination to get a move on, and within 12 months of their demobilization, they found themselves partners and sole proprietors of a fairly prosperous road transport concern operating over the great part of south of England. But it wasn't the same thing as flying. Looking back over the strenuous years of active service, they remembered vividly the good times they had had, while the sticky times were mellowed until they could afford to laugh at those occasions when they had the winds up badly. Then, with a suddenness akin to the arrival of the Whizbang, came the telegram from Sir Reginald Forsyth, asking the chums to see him on the morrow. Sir Reginald Forsyth had been Bernstein's and Keaton's OC, or to employ the service phraseology, a wing commander. On his demobilization, he went to live at Ayr Grange, a large old-world house standing on high ground, a good 5 miles from Blandford. Very rarely he left his country house. His visits to town were few and far between, and his friends wondered at the reticence of the versatile and bravely Forsyth. He seldom wrote to anyone. When he did, his correspondence were brief and to the point. More frequently he telegraphed, and then he meant business. In pre-war days, Ayr Grange was famous for its weekend house parties. The shooting, one of the best in the country of Dorset, was an additional source of attraction to Forsyth's guests. But the war and the afterwards had changed all that. Very few guests were to be found at Ayr Grange. The staff and servants were greatly reduced. The well-kept grounds developed a state of neglect. Sir Reginald's friends came to the conclusion that the baronet, who had become mouldy, they wondered what possessed him to live an almost hermit-like existence. Forsyth knew their curiosity, but he merely shrugged his shoulders and carried on. His work in the world of aviation was by no means ended. It might be said that it was yet as long away from attaining its zenith. Early on the morning following the receipt of the baronet's telegram, Sir Reginald's car pulled up in front of the premises used as the headquarters of the Southern Roads Transport Company. Kenyon and Bernstein, having final instruction to their works foreman, a former flight sergeant, RAF, jumped into the car and were soon whistling northwards at speeds that was considerable in the excess of that fixed by regulations. Although the retiring disposition, Sir Reginald Forsyth had made a point of keeping in touch with his former officers. He had a sort of personal interest in every one of them, and on their part they had regarded him as one of the best. Whether on rare occasion Forsyth ran down to Bournemouth, he invariably looked up Bernstein and Keaton to talk over old times, but being invited to Ayr Grange was quite a different matter. Vaguely the chums wondered if it might mean conjecturing ideas that somehow failed to be convincing, yet they knew that there was something in the wind. They knew Sir Reginald and his methods. Though Blandford, up and past the now deserted hermits, were formerly German prisoners, led an almost idyllic existence in their empty country. enemy's country. The car sped on until it gained the lofty downs in the direction of Shaftesbury. Then, turning up a steep and narrow lane, the car drew up the gate of Ayr Grange. It had to. There was no gatekeeper to unlock and throw open the massive iron gates that the task of the chauffeur had to perform, stopping the car again in order to make secure the outer portals of Sir Reginald's demise. While the car remained stationary, the two occupants looked in vain for a glimpse of the house. All they could see was the winding, weed-grown road with a thick belt of pine tree on either hand. To the left of the road and under the lee of the trees were half a dozen wooden huts, unmistakably of a type known as temporary military quarters. Smoke issuing from the chimneys suggests the idea that they were in occupation, and a couple of green-clad men carrying a length of copper pipe on their shoulders confirmed the fact. Somewhere from behind the trees came the sharp rattle of a pneumatic drilling machine. Kenyon glanced at his companion. "What's the old man up to, I wonder?" he inquired, quite a labor colony. "Look, air flasks too, by Jove." A pile of rusty wrought iron cylinders stacked on the grass by the side of the path recalled visions of the bygone days. "Something doing, that's evident," agreed Bransdine. "What's the stunt, and why are we hiked into it?" "Wait and see, old bird," replied Kenyon. The chauffeur regained the car and slipped into the clutch. For another quarter of a mile the car climbed steadily, negotiating awkward corners in the rutty, winding path until, emerging from the woods, it pulled up outside the house of Fordyke. No powdered footman awaited them. On the steps, clad in worn but serviceable tweeds, stood Sir Reginald Fordyke himself, the baronet generally referred to by his former officers as the old man. Was of medium height, broad-shouldered and deep-chested. He was about 35 years of age, with well-bronzed features, clean-shaven, and possessed a thick crop of closely cut dark brown hair tinged with iron gray. He held out his left hand as Kenyon and Bransdine ascended the stone steps. His right hand had been enveloped in surgical bandages, and greeted his guest warmly. "Glad to see you, boys," he exclaimed. "It's good of you to come. Have a glass of sherry." He led the way to the study, rang a bell, and gave instructions to a manservant whom Kenyon recognized as the O.C.'s batman somewhere in France. Sir Reginald sat on the edge of the table and whimsically regarded his former subordinates. At that moment, rising above the staccato rattle of the pneumatic hammer, came the unmistakable whir of an aerial propeller. To Caton and Bransdine, it was much the same as a trumpet's call to the old war-horse. "Sounds like old times, eh?" remarked Sir Reginald. "Rather, sir," agreed Caton heartily, and at a loss to express himself further, he relapsed into silence. "Experimental work, sir?" inquired Bransdine. Fordyke nodded. "Yes," he replied in level tones. "Experimental work. That's it. That's why I sent for you. I'm contemplating a flight around the world. Keen at having a shot of it?" Chapter 2. Fordyke Explains. The two chums were not in the least taken aback with the announcement. They knew the way of their late O.C. On active service, Fordyke was in the habit of issuing orders for certain operations to be performed, without apparently considering the magnitude or the dangers of the undertaking. The officer or man to whom the order was given almost invariably executed it properly. In the few cases where the individual instructed to carry out a stunt failed to rise to the occasion, that was the end of him. As far as his service under Wing Commander Sir Reginald Fordyke went, Fordyke had no use for faint-hearted subordinates. On the other hand, Caton and Bransdine were astonished at being invited to take part in what promised to be the biggest aerial undertaking ever contemplated. After nearly 2 years on the ground, the prospect of going up seemed too good to be true. Business difficulties perhaps, hazarded Forsyth, noting the faint signs of hesitation on the part of the two chums. Think it over, but I suppose you'd like to have a few particulars on the stunt before committing yourselves. I think it would be arranged, sir, replied Kenyon. As regards our little show, we could leave it to our head foreman. He is steady-going fellow, and all that sort of thing. It's merely a question of a month, I suppose. Less than that, 20 days to give a time limit, declared the baronet. Either 20 days or few. No. However, it will outline the salient features of the scheme. Like a good many others, it arose out of an almost trivial incident, a bet with an American air staff officer whom I met in London just after the Yankees seaplane NC-4 flew across the Atlantic, or rather hopped across, without detracting from the merits of the stupendous undertaking. It must be remembered that the seaplane was escorted the whole way and aligned several times en route. The Yankee General U.B. outed his name, offered to bet. The Yankee General U.B. outed his name, offered to bet anyone $50,000 that an American aircraft would be the first to circumnavigate the globe. Half a dozen of us took him on, not that we could afford to throw away any equivalent to 10,000 pounds, but because we had sufficient faith in the old country to feel assured that the accomplishment of a flight around the world would be the work of a British-owned and flown machine. Shortly after the wager was accepted, came the news that the R-34 had flown from East Fortune to New York in 108 hours, making the return journey in 76 hours. That rather staggered General outed, I fancied, and he had a great shock when Alec and Brown covered nearly 2,000 miles between Newfoundland and Ireland without a single stop. Things from a British aviation point of view looked particularly rosy. Then, for some obscure reason, air aboard appeared to let the whole matter of aerial navigation slide, or at any rate they gave no encouragement. The big dirigibles were dismantled and sold, powerful airplanes were scrapped, air stations were closed, and in parsimonious wave of retirement, even our old Royal Air Force was threatened with ignominious relegation to corps under the control of the War Office. About 3 months ago, a wealthy Swiss, a M. Chavaz, who had made a pile in the United States, offered a prize to the value in British money of £25,000 to be given to the first airman to circumnavigate the globe, either in a lighter or heavier than air machine. The prize is open to all comers, and already the Yankees and Germans have announced their intention of competing. "A Hun?" exclaimed Kenyon. "I thought the Fritz, under the new terms of the armistice, had to surrender all his aircraft." "But he hasn't," remarked Forsyth dryly. "Nor is he likely to, and if the Allies haven't the means to enforce the terms, that's not my affair. If a Hun does compete, let him. That's my view, providing he does not resort to any of his dirty tricks. There will be no valid reason why the door should be banged in the face. Because he is down and out is no reason why we should continue to sit on him. Commensally, I regard German goods as a means to reduce the present extortionate price of things in England. I am no believer in dumping. I never was. But if our manufacturers cannot compete with the products of a country beaten in war and torn by internal troubles, then there is something wrong somewhere. But I am digressing. Briefly, the terms of the contest are as follows. Any type of machine or engine can be employed, and as many descents as are necessary to replenish fuel and stores. A start can be made from any place chosen by the competitor, but the machine must finish at the same spot within 20 days. Again, any route can be chosen so that advantage can be taken of existing air stations, but, and this is a vital point in order to fairly circumnavigate the globe, competitors must pass within 1 degree of a position immediately opposite to the starting point. Do you follow me? What is known in navigation as great circle sailing, replied Bransdeen. If a start is made somewhere on the 50th parallel north, the halfway time will be somewhere 50 degrees south, with a difference of 180 degrees of longitude. That's it, agreed Sir Reginald. Now the difficulty arises where to find 2 suitable places answering the conditions. With the exception of a small part of Cornwall, the whole of Great Britain lies north of latitude 50, therefore, to reach the 50th parallel in the southern hemisphere would mean making a position far southward of New Zealand, where, I take it, there are no facilities for landing and taking in of petrol. Nor is the vast extent of the United States any better off in that respect. I think, am I right in saying that there is no habitable land diametrically opposite to any place in Uncle Sam's Republic? Forsyth produced a small globe from his corner of the room in order to confirm his statement. And the old botch is a jolly sight worse off, said Kenyon. I don't suppose any British Dominion will tolerate him. It's certain he won't be allowed to fly over any Allied fortress, so where is he? Paying the penalty for his misdeeds, replied Sir Reginald grimly. It's not exactly a case of va victis. If he's played his game, he would have taken his licking with a better grace, because it wouldn't have hurt him so much. How many competitors are there for the Crevasse strike, sir? Asked Bransdeen. A Yank, a Hun, and myself, replied Forsyth. That is up to the present. For some reason the idea hasn't caught on with our fellows. Probably there's a rush for entries later on, perhaps too late. I'll show you my little craft, but before doing so I give you a few details of the contest. My idea is to start from Gibraltar. For the actual race, of course, I'll have to take my airship there, but that's a mere detail. Why Gibraltar? Here's an encyclopedia, Canyon. Look up the position of Gibraltar. Latitude 36 degrees 6 north, longitude 5 degrees 21 seconds west, replied Kenyon after consulting the work, and the antipode of Gibraltar would be latitude 36 degrees 6 seconds south, longitude 174 degrees 39 seconds east, continued the baronet. The longitude, of course, being easily determined by adding 180 degrees that of Gibraltar. Now the next thing to be done, as a matter of fact I've determined already, is to find the habitable spot approximating the second set of figures. Look up Ackland, Caton. Ackland is latitude 36 degrees 52 seconds south, longitude 174 degrees 46 seconds east, replied Kenneth. Why, that's less than a degree either way. Exactly, agreed Forsyth. The next point is to determine the air route distance between 2 places, so as to make the best of the prevailing winds when one has to maintain an average speed of 50 miles an hour for 20 days. The average of the following winds cannot be ignored. You'll bust do more than that, sir, remarked Peter Bransdeen. She'll do 200 an hour, declared the baronet emphatically. I haven't had a trial spin yet, but she'll come up to my expectations. If the stops that lower the average, naturally, I mean, to take the east to west course, it means a saving of 24 hours. If I took the reverse direction, I'd be a day to the bad on returning to the starting point. The actual course I'll have to work out later. That's where I want expert assistance. Also, I want the aid of a couple of experienced navigators, and so that's why I sent for you. We're on it, declared both chums. I thought as much, rejoined Forsyth. with a smile. There's one thing I owe to make clear the matter of terms. Kenyon made a depreciatory gesture. Not so fast, Kenyon, protested his chief. It's a rock-bottom position. 25% of the prize, if we are successful, is yours, collective share. If we fail, then I'm broke, absolutely. I've sunk my last penny into this concern, because I'm hanged if I'm going to sit still and let a foreigner be the first to make an aerial circumnavigation of the globe. Now let me introduce you to the airship Golden Hind. Chapter 3. The Golden Hind. Appropriate name of the Golden Hind, remarked Branston, as the three ex-RAF officers made their way toward the concealed hangar. That's what Drake's ship was called, and he was the first Englishman to circumnavigate the world. Yes, replied Forsyth, we must make it as an augury that the Golden Hind will do in the air what her namesake did on sea. Not in every respect, I hope, said Kenyon with a laugh. Drake did a considerable amount of filibustering on his voyage, I believe. Ah, yes, answered Sir Reginald. Those were good old days. Now left, he added, mind yourself, the brambles are a bit dangerous. Turning off the grass-grown road and down a side path, the two chums found themselves entering a dense thicket that formed an outer fringe of pile wood. Shortcut, remarked Forsyth laconically. Now, there you are. A glade in the woods revealed the end of a lofty corrugated iron shed, the hangar in which the Golden Hind was fast approaching. Completion, the baronet knew his way about. He knew how to deal with the directional and often completely muddled officials ran the surplus disposal board, and had succeeded in obtaining at a comparatively low cost a practically new airship shed, together with an enormous quantity of material. Now tell me what you think of her, he said, throwing open a small door in the rear end of the building. Keaton and Branston paused in astonishment at what they saw. The Golden Hind was neither airship nor aeroplane in the strict sense of the word, but a hybrid embodied the salient features of both. The fuselage, constructed almost entirely of aluminum, was a full 120 feet in length, and enclosed so far as to form a series of cabins or compartments. Amidship there attended a beam of 15 feet, tapering fore and aft till the end compartments terminated in a sharp wedge. Whether there were observations windows, there were glazed with light but tough fireproof solenoid, sufficiently strong to withstand wind pressure. On either side of the hull, as Forsyth termed, were 6 planes arranged in pairs, each being 30 feet in fore and aft direction, and projecting 25 feet from the side of the fuselage. Thus the total breadth of the Golden Hind was well under 60 feet. On angle brackets rising obtusely from the fuselage were 6 large aluminum propellers, chain-driven by means of 6 350 horsepower motors. Some power there, remarked Kenyon enthusiastically. Rather, agreed Sir Reginald, sufficient to lift her independently of the gas bags, while in the unlikely event of the motors giving out, there is enough lifting power in the envelope to keep her up for an indefinite period. Do you notice the small propellers in the wake of the large ones? Yes, replied Branston. Left-handed blades. Precisely, agrees Forsyth. They work on the same shaft, only in a reverse direction. It's a little stunt of mine to utilize the eddies in the wake of the main propellers. Yes, petrol-driven, I tried to find an ideal fuel, one that is non-inflammable, and practically so, except in compression. But that's done me so far. There is a huge fortune awaiting the chemist who succeeds in producing a liquid capable of conforming to these conditions. I even made a cornet-fired motor once, something on the Maxim gun principle, fed by a cardant grain from a hopper. It did splendidly as far as developing power was concerned, but the difficulty of excess consumption and pitting of the walls of the cylinders did me. However, my experiments haven't all been failures. Now look at this gas bag. It's only partly inflated, observed Peter. No, fully, corrected Fordyke. The envelope is a rigid one of aluminum, subdivided into 49 compartments, each which contain a flexible ballonet. Each ballonet is theoretically proof against leakage. In practice, there is almost an inappreciable posterity, which hardly counts for a comparative short period, say a month. The gas isn't hydrogen, nor is it helium we used during the war. Helium, although practically non-flammable, is heavier than hydrogen. Fortunately, I hit upon a rather smart youngster who has been in a government laboratory before he joined the RAF. With his assistant, I discovered a gas that is not only lighter than hydrogen, but is as non-inflammable as helium. He named this stuff boridium, after the youngster who had helped him. I've named this stuff boridium after the youngster who helped me so effectitiously. When the stunt's over, we're going to work the gas on a commercial basis, but for the present it is advisable to keep it a secret. You observe this section of the envelope is far from being circular. The horizontal diameter is 3.5 times of that vertical. That gives less surface for a side wind, and consequently less drift, while the cod's head and markle tail ought to give a perfect streamline. You carry a pretty stiff lot of fuel with those motors, remarked Kenyon. Rather was the reply. Enough for 50,000 miles, for 5,000 miles, which means allowing for deliberations from a straight uniform course, about 6 halts to replenish petrol tanks. We carry no water ballast of any description. When the fuel supply runs low, there is a tendency for the airship to rise, owing to the reduction of weight. To counteract this, a certain quantity of barium is exhausted from the bayonets in cast iron cylinders, where it is stored under pressure until required again. The leakage during this operation is less than 0.5%. Now we'll go on board. Past groups of busy workmen, the 3 ex-officers made their way. Both Kenyon and Bransdeen noticed that the men worked as if they had an interest in what they were doing. Several they recognized as being the same flight in which they had served on the other side of the channel. Like old times, said Kenyon in low voice. Rather old, sir, agreed his chum. They boarded the Golden Hind, where the workmen were putting finishing touches to the interior of the decorations of the cabin. The floor was composed of a rigid aluminum plates corrugated in order to provide a firm foothold and temporarily covered with slacking to prevent undue wear upon the relatively soft metal. The door of the floor by which they entered was on the port side aft. It opened into the saloon 20 feet by 7, which in turn communicated with the fore and aft alleyway, extending almost the extreme length of the fuselage. We'll start right aft and work forward, said Fordyke. If you can suggest any alteration in the internal fitting, let me know. It often happens that a new arrival spots something that the original designer has overlooked. Must have taken some thinking about, sir, remarked Bransdeen. Agreed Sir Reginald. I'm afraid I'm spent some sleepless nights over the business. This is my cabin. The chum found themselves in a compartment measuring 15 feet in a fore and aft direction, and 10 feet across the forward and bulkhead, and the width diminishing to the rounded end of the nacelle. It was plainly furnished, a canvas cot and folded table, and two camps chaired comprising the principal contents. The large windows with the solenoid plane afforded a wide outlook, while, should the atmospheric condition be favourable, the window opened after the manner of those in a railway carriage. Retracting their steps, the chums inspected the motor independently forward of the owner's cabin. Each was in compartment measuring 10 feet by 6 feet, leaving an uninterrupted alleyway nearly 3 feet in length between. The fuel and oil tanks are underneath the alleyway, Forsyth pointed out. I'm using pressure feed in preference to gravity feed. If you keep the center gravity lower, what do you think of the engines? Clicking little motors, replied Kenyon enthusiastically as he studied the spotless clean mechanism with professional interest. These are 6 motor rooms, 3 on each side, observed the baronet. I'm taking 12 motor mechanics to be on the safe side. When we're running free, one man can look after 2 engines, but in any case, half the number will be off duty at a time. Now, this is your cabin. He opened the sliding door on the port side corresponding with the officer's dining room, the starboard side. It was a compartment of 20 feet by 6 feet and 6 inches, with a bunk at each end running athwards, and as plainly furnished as the owner's quarters. Heaps of room, declared Bransdine, and warming apparatus too. Yes, replied Forsyth. We had the exhaust lead under the cabin. Nothing like keeping warm at high altitude. Warmth and good food. That's more than half the battle. See this ladder? He indicated a metal ladder in the alleyway, clamped vertically to the outer wall of the cabin. Leads through the hatchway, he continued, right to the upper surface of the envelope. There's an observation platform used to take stellar observations and all that sort of thing, but you won't find a machine gun there, he added with a laugh. Passing through the midship pair of motor rooms, Forsyth halted in a doorway on the port side. Pantry and kitchen, he remarked. I'm taking a couple of good cooks. All the stoves are electrically heated. There's a dynamo working off the main shaft of each of the midship motors. The starboard one provides juice for the kitchen, that on the port generates electricity for the searchlight and internal lighting. Underneath are fresh water tanks and dry provision stores. On the port side, corresponding to the kitchen, were the air mechanics' quarters, while beyond the forward motor room, the alleyway, determined opening into a rectangular space 30 feet long and 12 feet at its greatest breadth. The crew members' quarters, explained Forsyth, ample accommodation for 8 deck hands and 2 cooks. You'll notice that the headroom is less than elsewhere. That's because of the navigation room overhead. The chums looked upward at the ceiling. There was no indication of a hatchway or any description. You gained the navigation room from the alleyway, exclaimed Sir Reginald, noting their puzzled glances. Saves the inconvenience of disturbing the watch below by having to pass through their quarters. Up with you, Kenyon. Thank you, lucky star, you're not a bulky fellow. Mind your head against that gitter. Bransdine followed his chum, and the baronet bringing up the rear. The combined chart room and navigation compartment was spacious in extent, but considerably congested with an intricate array of levers and telephones, indicated switches, and compact wireless cabinets. In the center was a table with clamps to hold a large-sized chart. Right in the eyes of the ship was a gyroscopic compass, which, by reason of the needle pointing to the true instead of the magnetic North Pole, greatly simplified steering and course, since those complicated factors, variations, and deviations were eliminated. Altimeters, healing indicators, barometers, thermometers, and chronometers, with other scientific instruments, completed the equipment of the room, which was in telephonic communication with every part of the airship. From the car, the three men ascended to the interior of the envelope, climbing by means of aluminum rugs bolted to the flexible shaft. One inside the rigged envelope, it was possible to talk. It was possible to talk the whole 500 feet length of the airship along a narrow platform. From the latter, crossways ran at frequent intervals so that access could be obtained any of the bayonets. The interior reeked of the strong but not obnoxious fumes of barium. Leak somewhere, remarked Canyon, sniffing audibly. Yes, agreed Fordyke. One of the supply pipes gave out this morning. Otherwise, you wouldn't know by the sense of smell that the envelope was fully charged. He struck a match. He struck a match and held it aloft. It burned with a pale green flame. I wouldn't care to do this with hydrogen, he remarked. Non-inflammability of the gas particularly does away with all risk. When you recall the numerous accidents to aircraft in the earlier stages of the war, you'll find that in over 80% they were caused by combustion, or of course I'm referring to disaster other than that caused directly by enemy action. Now carry on. Up you go. No, hold on, he added, as a bell rang shrilly just above their head. One of the workmen was coming down, and said Fordyke, opening a flap at the bottom of his shaft automatically, rings and alarm otherwise anyone ascending might stand the risk of being kicked on the head by the feet of someone else descending. By Jove, I know that chap, exclaimed Canyon after the mechanic had descended along the vertical ladder. Yes, it's Flight Sergeant Hayward, added Branding. He's got the DCM for downing two Butch planes over Bampoon. That's right, agreed the baronet. Jolly fine mechanic too. He is too. Do you happen to know how he came to join the Royal Flying Corps? No? Then I'll let you into a little secret. It was in 16 that he enlisted. Previous to that, he was a conscientious objector, and I believe a genuine one at that. What caused him to change his opinion, rather remarkable. Do you remember that Zepp raid over Lancaster? Hayward was driving a motor lorry that night somewhere up in the hills north of Manchester. A bomb fell in the road some yards behind him and blew the back of his lorry to bits. He came off with it shaking and changed outlook on life. Next morning he joined up. Yes, Hayward's quite a good sort. He's been invaluable to me. Had any trouble from inquisitive outsiders, sir? Asked Canyon. No, none whatsoever, replied Fordyke. Touch wood. People in the village hereabouts have seen enough aircraft during the war to take the edge off their curiosity. As for our rival competitors, well, if they can pick up a wrinkle or two, it will make a contest even more exciting. If we succeed, there'll be a stir, said Brandine. Yes, agreed the baronet. It's the first who score in these undertakings. See what a fuss was made when the Atlantic was first flown by aeroplanes. If the feat were repeated, not a fraction of the public interest would be directed to it. The novelty has gone, as it were. Even interest in the flight to Australia, in itself an epic of courage, skill, and determination, was limited. Sensation of yesterday becomes mediocrities of today. For instance, Bellerots's flight from France to England. See what an outburst of excitement that caused. Since then, thousands of machines had crossed the channel without exciting comment. Now I think I've shown you everything that is to be seen. How about lunch? That was chapter 3. The next chapter is chapter 4, The Departure. I'll be live streaming ASMR tomorrow, probably earlier, around 2 or 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I will see everyone tomorrow. Bye-bye.